Rand Paul is someone who has been an advocate for small government in Kentucky for a long time. And you may have heard, he's got. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about his upcoming potential political campaign. But please give a big Central Kentucky welcome for Dr. Rand Paul.
I'm afraid if I don't face the crowd, there might be people making hand signals or throwing things from behind me, so I want to make sure I can see everyone while I'm speaking. Thomas Paine wrote that government is a necessary evil. I think most people know what that means, but I think it bears explaining. Government is necessary in some ways. We have a government to keep the peace. We have a government to repel foreign invasion. We do need a government. But what does he mean when he says it's a necessary evil? I think what he means is that for every ounce of government you get, you give up an ounce of freedom. There's a corresponding loss of freedom for every increase in the level and size of your government. This is very important, and this is why we, or many of us in the freedom movement, we oppose the enlargement of government. We oppose the increasing of taxes. Some in the media have said, well, you're just an absolutist against raising taxes. Well, if we start from the premise that government is already too big, we need to say we're against raising taxes. So I've been part of a group for 15 years, the Kentucky Taxpayers United. We've helped to bring the pledge to Kentucky. This is the Taxpayer Pledge, where we get candidates to sign a pledge saying they won't raise taxes. We also have them sign a pledge saying that they will try to oppose increasing spending, that we will try to restrain spending as opposed to increasing taxes. And this is important because even many in the Republican Party have lost their way with this. Recently in Kentucky, our governor said we had a $450 million shortfall. He's been saying this for a year. He says it so long that we're supposed to believe it's true. Well, really what they're talking about is a $456 million shortfall based on expected or projected budget. So this year, if you made $25,000 and you want to make $30,000 next year, but you made $25,000, did you lose $5,000 or did you make the same? Right now in Kentucky, in the midst of a horrible recession, the worst we've had in many years, we're still running almost even on revenue. And yet they tell us, and many of our Republican leaders capitulated on this, we've got to raise taxes. So they ended up raising taxes. This is not what the Republican Party was supposed to be about. At the federal level, we have as part of the Republican platform that we don't believe in bailing out private businesses. And yet what happened? The majority of the Republican leadership voted to bail out the banks. Now not only did we just bail out the banks, we bailed out a lot of individuals. Individuals who made millions of dollars a year. But they told us we're kind of too stupid to understand. They said, well, they need a retention bonus. If we don't give them the bonuses at AIG, they might leave. How horrible would that be if the guy making $1 million a year, running a company into the ground, might leave employment? You know, I think you might need a different job other than something in the insurance industry because they've run the entire industry into the ground. But no, we're told that the questions are too complicated for you and I to understand. They're too big to fail. Now, if you own a gas station and you don't bring in as much as you need to pay your bills, you will fail. So it's okay for you guys to fail. It's just not okay for a business too big to fail. The thing is that big businesses, we don't want them to fail, but they can fail and the world doesn't come to an end. I live in Bowling Green. Fruit of the Loom failed because of foreign competition and many other reasons, but they failed. They restructured, they went bankrupt, and guess who bought them? Warren Buffett bought them. General Motors could go through a restructuring and succeed. They sell 9 million cars. Toyota sells 9 million cars, but Toyota's making $20 billion and General Motors is losing $40 billion. There is no model that General Motors, under the current circumstances, can make money. Because if you can't make money selling 9 million, you have to say, well, I'll make money if I could say sell 12 million. We're in the middle of a recession. They're going to sell 7 million this year. Toyota's making money. They have a different model. They have a different wage scale, and they pay $40 an hour instead of $70 an hour. You have to completely change things, and General Motors can only survive through bankruptcy. But what does everybody in government tell you? Too big to fail. So it started under the Republicans. The Republicans said, we'll bail out the banks. Many of the Republicans went along with bailing out the car industry. But the thing is that where does it end? We have to point out that government ownership of enterprise does not work. Many people understand that the Soviet Union failed, but they don't understand why. It's because socialism doesn't work. You cannot set the price of a good. It's that simple. You cannot set the price of a loaf of bread because you don't know what the price should be. Only the market can determine that. If you set the prices too low, all the bread is gone. There are long lines waiting for breads. You have to ration the breads. That's the way a socialist economy works. But that's what we're going towards. We're going towards the government ownership of banks, the government ownership of the auto industry. Where does this end? My point in running for office, which I have formed an exploratory committee to run for the U.S. Senate, is that it's not just the Republicans or the Democrats. We need strong people in some party to stand up for the taxpayer. We have had great leaders in our past, and there's one great quote I like from Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater wrote a book in 1964, The Conscience of the Conservative, and it actually has a Kentucky tie. The publisher was Simon Publishing over in Shepherdsville. And the quote is that I don't believe in limiting the size of government or making it more efficient, for I mean to reduce its size. I do not undertake to promote welfare, rather I propose to extend freedom. It is not my aim to pass bills, but to repeal them. It is not my aim to initiate new programs, but to cancel out old ones that do violence to the Constitution. I will not ask first whether legislation is needed before I have first determined whether it is constitutional. And if I am later accused of neglecting my constituents' interests, I will reply that I was informed that their main interest was liberty. And in that cause, I am doing the best that I can. We need people in Washington who not just are generally maybe a little bit pro-business or a little bit conservative. The place is a mess. You have to have someone who will stand up and not only vote no, but vote no at the top of their lungs to everyone and explain what is wrong. Throughout 8 years of the Bush administration, the deficit went from $5 to $10 trillion. Some, like my father, myself, and others in the Liberty Movement, realized that the Republicans were doing a bad job with the budget. The last Bush deficit was $500 billion. And now we jump ahead. Most of the Republicans are voting no against the Obama budget. It's $1.75 trillion in debt. And the media says, they take President Obama at his word. He says he will cut that deficit in half by the end of his term. Well, number one, that's probably not going to happen. But even if he did, he's tripled the deficit, and he's going to cut in half a tripling of the deficit. So if he did that, the budget would still be 1.5 times greater than Bush's last deficit. And that's after 4 years. Every president for the last 30 years has said, I have this deficit reduction plan, and I will reduce the deficit over a 4-year period. Not one of them have ever been right. Whenever I hear a deficit reduction plan, I think of the Soviet 5-year agricultural plans. They would promote these plans and say, in 5 years we'll meet this goal, this goal, this goal. And they never met them. They always either lied, changed the goals, or changed the numbers and just made believe they made the goals. Here in America, there's still enough truth that people say you didn't meet your goal, but the deficit reduction goals never work. So what do you have to do if you want to reduce the deficit? I say propose a balanced budget. First thing. If I were in the Senate, I would say the Republican alternative, we may not win because the Democrats have 60 votes, but let's make the Republican alternative a balanced budget the very first year. There's no reason we can't do that. What is the Republican alternative right now? The Democrats propose a $1.75 trillion deficit next year, and they say they'll balance the budget in 15 years or something crazy. What's the Republican alternative? We can balance the budget in 10 years. Well, they're both ridiculous. No one's talking about what you have to do. You have to cut spending. Republicans for many years